Hey, how's it going? I am going to teach the everyday average Joe how to tuck point like a pro using this called a grout bag. It's similar to an icing bag, except it's a lot more heavy duty. Sometimes they're made of leather, sometimes they have reinforced tips such as metal, hard plastic. Sometimes if I have to stick the tip inside of the mortar joints, I'll reinforce it with some heavy duty tape like Gorilla Tape or some duct tape or something like that. Anybody can do this. It is not hard. I would be more than willing to come do it for you for a small fee. So, first thing we want to do, 1 second. So this is a chimney. We've taken a 4.5-inch angle grinder, ground out all the mortar joints. We need to go back at least 3/4 of an inch. That way we have plenty of room to put our fresh mortar in there. You want to take a blower, a brush. I like to use a hose as long as there's no big giant gaps or any big holes in the mortar joints back there that water is going to get in. Chimneys are designed to take on a certain amount of water. I've built these things for years from the ground up, and on the rough end and down in the smoke shelf and all that good stuff on the inside, it's designed to take a little bit of water on. Usually if you're having a leak on your chimney, I'd say 5 times out of 10 it's the flashing, which is the metal at the bottom, or it has to do with the crown at the top, which is the concrete on top, being cracked or broken up. So I've ground out everything. I've rinsed it out really well. I've mixed up my mortar. I like to use, when I'm using a grout bag, I like to do it 2-to-1 ratio, or actually 2.5-to-1. If you mix it 2.5-to-1 and you put it in your grout bag and you get ready to start going, you can't squeeze it through the tip. A couple things could be wrong. Your tip could be too small. You can take a razor knife, cut the tip a little bit bigger, or most of the time, if that's not the issue, your mortar's got a little bit too much sand in it. So I always take a dash extra mortar powder, whatever type of mortar you're using, and add it to it. It makes it a little richer and it makes it flow through the bag a little bit better. A lot of people will tell you that this is completely wrong, you should not do this, but in my experience, I've been doing this for 26 years. I've done this thousands of times. You know, if you read the books or you go to school for it, they're going to tell you to do it in lifts. A lift is basically a layer of mortar. So if I have a 3/4 inch joint, I'm going to do 3 1/4 inch lifts. What I've noticed happens when you do that, even though you wet your wall down with a sprayer or a hose or anything before you go to grout bag or tuck point it in, is that the first lift, the existing mortar that we're going to be tuck pointing up against sucks all the water out of the new mortar instantly, which is why they want you to do that in a way. Second lift kind of does the same thing, and the third lift, it just kind of slows the process down. I've had many times have done this and had to go back over co-workers' works where the lifts themselves were like separated from one another, and it just didn't work out good. So what I do is, like I said, I mix the mortar. I like to add Acryl 60. It's a bonding agent. It's a mortar conditioner. It's basically like glue for mortar. Sometimes, depending on the situation, I may take, you know, straight Acryl 60 in a cup with a chip, like a 2-inch chip brush, paint it in the joints, kind of give that, you know, get that wet with that bonding agent, and then tuck point it. I found that's not 100% necessary either. Just kind of slows down the process. I'm all about trying to get stuff done quick, sufficient, and neat. So what I do is I determine, you know, how sticky it's going to need to be, you know, things of that nature, and I just add it straight to the water in the mortar before I go to mix it. swish it up real good. I use a drill and a mortar paddle. That's not near me at the moment, but I'll show you that later on. So now what I'm going to do is just go ahead and wet down the mortar, the existing mortar joints with a sprayer. You just need enough to wet it down. As you can see here, I've grout bagged some in already. So you know, this is a process. Once you start to put this in, it's a game of jumping back and forth. You know, I'm going to grout bag a section in. I'm going to keep track of, you know, how hard that's getting, how fast that's setting up. I may mist it with the sprayer to kind of keep it from prematurely setting up, because sometimes it can crack on you, which isn't good either, because what happens is through the winter, if you're from the Midwest or anywhere that's cold, I'm from Cincinnati, so we get fairly cold winters. You know, you get a hairline crack in your mortar joint, or you get some separation from the brick to the new mortar. It creates a hairline crack. You know, it snows, it rains, sunshine comes out, and it's called the freezing thawing process. So basically, if it snows on this chimney at night and there's a ledge with a crack in it, it's going to snow in the morning over this way. When the sun rises up in the east, it's going to melt the snow. The snow's going to turn into water. Obviously, it's going to go into crack, and then over that night it's going to refreeze again. And if you've ever made ice before, which I'm sure everyone has, you know that it expands when it freezes. Water can be a pretty cruel competitor out here. So you know, that process happening over and over and over and over again, it just destroys your mortar joints. So with that being said, I'm going to take my grout bag. I've already cut my tip. Before I use these, I like to take my sprayer, kind of mist it a little bit. I don't want, you know, water pouring out of it or anything, so it's going to go through my tarp that I have laid down on my chimney to keep the roof clean. It's going to make it all messy, and it's going to make it a lot more difficult when I go to acid wash this thing later on, which I'll talk about in a little while. So what I do is I take the grout bag, usually find the seam. There's a seam right here, and I'll take it and I'll fold it over, because my goal is to keep this bag clean, because if I'm not, I'm squeezing it, I'm moving around, I'm turning it, and then the next thing you know, I'm going to do something and I put my hand on the brick wall and I'm smearing it, and again, I'm slowing down the process because I'm dirtying up brick that I don't need to be dirtying up. So again, I find the seam and I'll fold it over. I usually leave this end up. I'm pretty good aim with my trowel getting in there. I like to use something small. This is a duckbill trowel. Some people use margin trowels, some people use full-size brick trowels. You know, just take your mud, make sure that it's fairly loose, or else it's not going to flow through the grout bag like you want it to, and you're just going to get frustrated as all get out. Another thing, when you go to mix your mortar, you want to make sure there's no like pea gravel or mulch or anything of that nature, chunky, that can be in your sand. Or maybe if you bought a bag of mortar and you let it get wet and it has some of the mortar powder is set up and created hard chunks in it, this is no good for a grout bag. You want to stay away from anything that can clog that tip up. You know, usually what happens is you go to fill it up. I fill mine up pretty full so I can get a lot out of one bag. But someone who's new at this, they're going to want to kind of maybe throw in like a scoop and a half or maybe 2 scoops, so that they're only dealing with maybe this much of the bag. That way you can get your control and stuff down with the bag. So, you know, I take this again with the seam. I don't know why, it just seems to work the best that way when you fold it over with the seam. Take my mortar, make sure it's loose. So I'll just take the trowel full of mortar, just throw it in the bag. Try my hardest to keep the outside of this bag clean. Probably doesn't help that I'm a neat freak. So, you know, here we got the mortar sitting in this part of the bag. what I like to do is kind of grab it, and I'm gonna, you know, shake it and kind of jerk it so that everything falls down. When that happens, every single time, mortar's gonna splash back up in your face. So when I do it, I kind of turn my head and just do a real quick one of those. So if you can see, the mortar is all kind of condensed down in the bottom. This is about 2.5 scoops. It's about a little more than half the bag. So if it's too loose, obviously it's going to run out of the end. If it's too hard, it's not going to come out of the end. So I just take it like this, kind of just however you want to fold it up. I'm kind of like going like this to get the air out, and I'm going to turn it a little bit. This process is basically a game of, I'm going to squeeze with this hand, and I'm going to kind of control it with this hand. I need to keep this bag as tight as humanly possible, because if not, it's not going to squeeze out right. And I can kind of show you here how it comes out. When you squeeze it, you're just going to squeeze it out like that. You're going to want to control it though. And you always want to keep this tight. So you're going to see me constantly shaking it. Shake it down, let everything drop. Gravity's going to do its job. Shake it down, squeeze, shake it down, squeeze, so on and so forth. I will tell you, I've taught a lot of people how to do this. Some people never get it. Some people get it right away. Well, actually, I take that back. No one ever gets this right away. So I'm going to wet these down. I kind of want to get them pretty thoroughly wet, especially if you're in the sun, or if you're in like a really hot climate, or if you have lots of wind. You really want to make sure that that mortar on the inside's wet, that existing mortar, because if not, you're just going to put new mortar in there. It's going to dry way too fast. It's going to crack away, and it's not going to be any good. I always have a rag near me, because I want to get rid of any water droplets. I don't know if you can see those on the video, because this is going to cause a big mess later. So I just like real gently wipe the excess water off the face of the brick. I'm going to shake my bag down, twist it super tight, and then I cut my tip a little bit bigger than most, and I cut it on a slight angle. I mean, it's not much. I don't know if you can see that. And depending on how big your mortar joint is, this one here, I can stick my finger in. This one, I can't get it in. You know, this one's huge. I can easily get the tip in there. But on some of these other tighter ones, like this one, I can't really get it in there without smearing it all over the face of the brick. You know, these are head joints, H-E-A-D. These are bed joints, B-E-D. I like to do my bed joints first, because what I notice happens is when I'm squeezing this along, it likes to fall down into the head joints. So if I do that first, it halfway fills my head joint up for me, so I have less work to do in a little while. You want to make sure you go systematically at this. You don't want to do a little here, a little there, a little up here, a little over there, because this is all going to be drying out, you know, a lot quicker than I prefer, but it is what it is. So I'm going to start. You can these tips, you can kind of squeeze them down. That's another reason I cut mine big. If I have a tight head joint, I can kind of squeeze that tip down, and I can squeeze that out thinner to get into that. If I have a big one, I'll just leave it open. I'll squeeze it out and it'll be bigger. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you how I fill a couple of these up. Hopefully you can see it on the video, and maybe sometime in the future might be able to do some of your own tuck pointing. It's really not that hard once you get the hang of it. So I like to take my tip and keep it away from me, like the longer end of the slant cut on the tip of the grout bag. That, because if I don't, then that, when I go to drag it, it'll want to plow itself, and that means that the mortar is going to spill up over the edge of the top and the bottom brick. So again, I'm going to squeeze. I'm just going to kind of go slow to show you, and this is a game of transferring the mortar from my right hand to my left hand. My right hand, I'm right-handed, is going to be where I get most of the pressure from. That's where in my left hand I'm going to kind of, I don't know if you can see, I'm kind of squeezed a little bit. That's where I'm going to get my control from. So these are my bed joints again. This one's a little bit tighter, so I'm gonna squeeze that tip, get it in there, see how it's filling. You can't see that on my video. And don't worry, like, you're gonna make a mess doing this. I guarantee it, I promise you. But that's what the acid's for later on. So I'm gonna do, you know, a little bit of these. I'm gonna go a little quicker. I don't want this stuff drying out on me too bad. Again, don't worry about if you get some on the brick. They make an acid. I like to use Vanatrol. Some people use SureClean 600. Some people use muriatic acid. I'd suggest staying away from the muriatic. I don't know if you can see where that mortar just fell down. It like pretty much filled that head joint up for me. So cutting down on my workload a little bit. 2 birds, 1 stone. I'm gonna go through and just squeeze some for you. When I'm done, I'm shaking it, I'm letting gravity do its thing. I'm twisting it tight enough to where it's not spilling out the end, but tight enough to where I'll be able to squeeze it out. Eventually, if you do this enough, you get pretty quick at it. This chimney here is probably, on the tall end, it's probably 8 or 9 foot tall. On the short end, it's about 5.5 foot tall, and it's probably about 6 foot wide. If I wasn't making a video, I could probably have this thing shot in, jointed out, and everything in probably about 2-3 hours. So, yeah, I'm squeezing this in. As the bag obviously gets emptier, it's going to get a little harder to squeeze it. Once you get down to where you just have a little bit in the tip, I mean, there's really not a whole lot to play with there. So usually what I do, I'll usually have a little bit more in it than this. That's when I'll drop back and I'll do my head joints, because I can have a lot more control when there's less mortar in the bag. So these, obviously you want to start from the bottom up, because if you start from the top down, it's just going to want to fall out. So I start from the bottom up. I'm going to drag it up against that bed joint mortar so that it doesn't fall back out, because sometimes you'll notice when you go to squeeze it up and you don't connect it with that top joint, it'll just roll right back out on you. See this one here, can't see it on camera or not, but it's really tight, so I'm pinching that tip of that. I'm able to get that mortar in there a little bit better. I'm going to do one more round squeezing the bag, and then I'm going to show you what the next step is in the process. So I got my bag full again. It's all kind of in this area. It's not down here yet, much of it. Remember to move your face, because when you shake this down, it's going to spray up at you. So I move it over, shake it, drop it, maybe a couple times. You can see when I do that, some of the mortar falls out. That's where you know, like, you're getting most of that air out of there. You don't really want, you want to try to avoid that. So when I go to close this up, I'm kind of working it right here as I'm squeezing here. I'm working some of that air out of the top, and then I'm going to get that twist. I don't know why these things always remind me of a candy corn. Kind of funny. So this is twisted a couple times. The way I hold it is with my index finger and my thumb, like that, and then I put the rest of my hand around here, and then this part of my hand right here is going to hold that twist closed, so that way I can actually use my thumb and all 4 fingers to kind of apply that pressure, because this will bother your wrist. If you have any wrists, I was in an accident and broke both of them, and broke both of my hands. So, but I've been doing this for so long, my hands are so built up, just used to it, I guess. Again, you want to get that wet a little bit. I'm in the shade right now, so I'm kind of spoiled at the moment. It's about 90-something degrees out right now in the middle of July. I work full-time for a company, hopefully be a foreman here soon. It's looking that way. And then I started my own business called HANDCRAFT RESTORATION about a year ago, just doing side jobs here and there, and really took off. So that's awesome. Trying to build something for my family and my son. Right now I work 8 hours a day at my day job, and honestly most nights I work till about dark. I get off at 2. Last night I worked till 10:30. I was loading up my vehicle it was dark outside. All right, bag's tight. Hand is how I showed you to hold it. This is kind of like my palm is holding that twist closed. I'm going to apply the pressure with this whole hand. This is going to take some practice and getting used to. It's not easy. I definitely make it look way easier than it is, just because I've been doing it for so long. My tip that I've cut is facing away from me, the opposite way that I'm dragging. I'm going to stick the tip inside the joint. I'm just going to apply pressure with my right hand, which is the one on the back, and I'm going to kind of control it with my left hand. I'm just going to make sure I bring that mortar out, you know, a little bit past the brick. They call it leaving it proud. That means there's more mortar there than you need, because the next step in the process is going to be taking a tuck pointer and kind of pushing this stuff in, making sure it gets all the way back. I'm pretty good about squeezing it all the way back, so I don't have to do much of that. And this twist that I'm doing, I don't know if you can see it or not, it kind of comes natural over time. Squeezing, squeezing, squeezing. I mean, I can get pretty good line off of just one squeeze, because I know how to transfer it and everything inside the bag. Get the bag tight again, holding it, tip away. Sometimes you might have to twist it around a couple times to achieve that. Stick it in the joint, just squeeze. If you're close to eye level, it'll be a little better, because you can tell if there's any low spots like that. But the next stage in the process, which is taking a tuck pointer and making sure you smash it in there real good, another reason we leave this proud is so that we have all the mortar on the wall that we need to fill those holes. So I don't have to go tracking down all kinds of other tools, you know, big trowel to put mud on or whatever, because I can just take my tuck pointer, which is when I cut down. I love them cut down. It's a lot more, you can be a lot more nimble with them, and you can really get into tight spaces better versus a regular size tuck pointer. These are obviously longer, they get further back, they reach longer, but I'm telling you, cut your tuck pointers down a little bit. So, squeeze some more of this in. There's a low spot right here, so I can take my bag, since I see it and I'm here, just dab a little bit on there. And stick it in there, squeeze it, make sure that it's kind of coming out. You don't want it, it's always better to have a little bit too much than not enough. Just speeds the process up. I'm all about trying to get things done quick and neatly. That's a huge thing with me. It's hard to find guys that are that have all those qualities. So I just squeeze these in. I have a little bit left in the bag. I'm going to go ahead and hit these head joints, just so I can kind of keep everything uniformed. I got it all over. See, it's on the brick. No big deal. Acid's going to take that off after a few days after this sets up. Squeeze them in. Make sure you drag that mortar up against that bed joint. Keep it stick in there. Don't worry about being sloppy. I'm actually being a little sloppy right now. Got a low head joint. I got a little bit left in the bag, so I'm gonna go ahead and take that and put it in there, save me a step later on. Check to make sure you didn't miss anything in this area that you're working in. I missed a head joint here, so I'm gonna put that in there. Missed a couple here. Start jumping around a little bit. Alright, so I'm pretty well got all that filled in. Normally I would kind of do it in columns, you know, maybe 3 foot or so, and I would do like the whole chimney. Then I would move over and maybe do another section. On this one, my goal was to do it in halves. So I was going to do half the chimney and then half the chimney as I go up. So, next step in the process, we're going to take a tuck pointer. Right now I only have my skinny ones near me. These things come in all different widths. That's your width. They're not very thick, as you can see. So what I'm going to do, I don't want to mess with the stuff that I just put in. That's way too wet. That's going to spooge right out. So I'm going to go down here where I was working before, and I'm going to just kind of start smashing this stuff in a little bit. This, you know, people, they will take way too long on this process trying to perfect it. You know, if you get to a spot, let me see, where there may be a little low spot, like right here, come up here to where you just squeeze, you got some fresh, still wet mortar, and you can take that and just put it in there. Obviously, if you come down here where you squeezed it earlier, it's going to be too hard, it's just going to crumble. So I'm gonna, like I said earlier, you got all the mud on the wall that you need to achieve this, as long as you, when you squeeze that mortar in with the grout bag, you squeezed it in flush. So this is simple. I'm just gonna go through and kind of smash these all down. Then I'm gonna scrape it like that. There's a variety of different types of finishes for this. We call them joints, joiners. This one here, it's I call it a skate joint. You can find these in like specialty shops. You're not going to find them at Home Depot or anything like that. Go to a supply yard or something. Usually what I like to do is hit all my head joints in order. You know, you can go down to up, up to down, left to right, whatever you want to do. Just trying to be sufficient, make sure I don't miss anything. Again, if I see any holes like that one there, I'm going to get some fresh mortar up here that's not quite hard yet. Well, where to go? Here it is. Kind of fill that in a little bit. Do all my head joints. This does not have to be pretty at all. You just want to make sure that there's not a big space behind there, that these are really full. So after I get all these, I'm going to do the bed joints. A lot of times you can just cut it, but if you didn't get it full, you're going to have an issue later when you go to join it out with any type of joiner that you use. I'm going to use my smaller tuck pointer because it's easier to handle. So yeah, I'm just kind of smashing this stuff down, kind of getting a little bit of the excess off, looking for low spots, things of that nature. If this, you're going to want to do small sections at first, because this stuff's going to get away from you. Brick are extremely dry natured. This stuff I just squeezed in about, I don't know, 20 minutes ago or so, and it's already a little harder than I like it to be. I got a hole right there. You can see, need to get some fresh mortar, put it in there. That's when I don't bother getting a grout bag back out. That's a whole process in itself, filling that thing back up. I just go up to my area where I just squeezed it, get some of the mortar that's more than likely still soft, throw it in there, move on. I'm jumping all over the place. This isn't like me. So this does not have to be pretty at all. The reason why, sometimes it does, depending, you know, I'm on a chimney in the center of a roof. I mean, you can kind of see this chimney from the backyard. Not that I'm trying to get anything over on my customers, but it's just not that important because it's going to look really good when we acid wash the whole chimney a few days from now. Kind of double check everything. So this is just going to be a game of jumping around, like I said earlier. Make sure this thing's still recording. This is my first video. I think I'm doing pretty good. I teach a lot of guys how to do a lot of stuff. I really enjoy it. I feel like I'm good at it. The work and teaching. Get that stuff off there. In my business, I don't like to do new masonry anymore. I do a lot more than masonry. Caulking, patching, concrete, any painting, all kinds of stuff. But the mason's what I've been for 26 years. So, just for time's sake, piece of brick broke off, no big deal. Adds character. Basically getting any of that excess off. You can use your tuck pointer, you can get a trowel, anything that's kind of sharp, just to kind of drag that along. Get it off there. Now normally what I would do is I grout bag, I wet it, I grout bag it in, let it sit for a little bit, get to where it's about, I don't know, where you could almost see your thumbprint, I guess. When you push on it like that, and then you take your tuck pointer, you're going to do all this, let it set again for a little bit, maybe mist it a couple times to keep it from drying prematurely. And then on this particular chimney, we're going to be wire brushing it, which in my opinion is genius, because not only are you recessing the brick with the wire brush, as long as you can control it pretty good, you're cleaning the brick. Bada bing, bada boom. Alright, I'm gonna quit playing with that. This video is getting long. Alright, so basically, as you can see, it's all just kind of haphazardly smushed in there. Nothing major. This kind of got away from me a little bit. I was lollygagging, talking too much. So I'm gonna go ahead and wire brush it. Like I just said though, normally you would let that sit a little bit, but it's pretty dry. Alright, let's see if I can set this down here. Hopefully I can find somebody that can edit these things. I'll just show you like this. This wire brush is beat up, but it still works. So you're just going to take your wire brush. You kind of want to do this lightly. I like to do my head joints first on this. I mean, it's just personal preference for me. So I'm just take the wire brush, just kind of lightly scrape that out. You want to, the two magic words in restoration business is match existing. So whatever the rest of the house looks like, that's what we're trying to mimic. I could take my skate joint, as I call it, and make this all nice and even, same depth. It's adjustable, so you can make it any depth that you want. But this is faster. So, as you can see, this is not very involved. Kind of go through. I want to make sure that these edges are just have a little bit of a reveal on them. Not too much, because when it snows this winter or rains really hard, I don't want anything finding its way in there. So normally what I do is, after I do all this, a couple days, usually they say about 3 days, you can acid wash it. I use, my favorite's Vanitrol. I use it, you just mix it with water. I like a 4-to-1 ratio, so that's 4 cups water, 1 cup Vanitrol. And as you can see, this is kind of cleaning the brick also. Any smears that I may have gotten on there, I'm knocking all that loose mortar off. And that way, all I have left to deal with are these little stains, and that stuff will get eaten right off by that acid. Now, this thing is, I'm sure you can probably tell in the video, it has brush lines in it. I don't want that. So after I kind of do my head joints like that, make sure it's revealed. Make sure they're relatively close to the same depth. I'm gonna leave that go for a minute. I usually take this and then I just run it this way. Call it cross hatching, kinda. As you can see those marks in there left by the brush. Kinda takes them out a little bit. Maybe go up and down, back and forth. See that little hole? And make sure I fill stuff like that in. You can usually just stick your finger in there and smash it in there a little bit. So I could sit here and play with this for a long time, but I do want to show you about corners real quick. This is a huge pet peeve of mine. So this back's been done already. This is the narrow side of the chimney.